guest today is one of the best bosses I've ever had. I met him when I was just 21 and quickly realized he was one of the smartest people I know. In fact, I only understand about half of what he says on social media. True story. He left a long-time corporate career to become an ER doctor.
So Ken Starnes, welcome to the patio. It's wonderful to have you.
Hi guys, good to be here, and thank you for the wonderful lies in your introduction.
I learned from the best, right? It's true. I probably Google about half of your statuses because I want to be cool and I'm not, and I still have no idea. Okay, so you went from being a retail store manager to starting a consulting business, if I remember correctly, back to corporate. So what made you go to med school and become a doctor?
So I have two answers for that. One is the official, what I put on personal statements and interviews and things like that, and then there's a little bit closer to the truth.
We want the truth.
Yeah. So the official line, and there is some truth to it, is, I grew up wanting to be a doctor, like literally from the get-go. My mom has a picture of me at like 4 years old where I've, drawn out, organ systems and the skeleton on a chalkboard. They gave me a copy of Gray's Anatomy when I was in fourth grade and went all the way through. I kind of got sidetracked a little, weirdly enough, in the early mid 90s when I graduated from high school. They thought we were going to have too many doctors. How'd that work out?
Yeah, right.
So it was really hard to get into med school. Like I knew people who were smart, and weren't able to. And I also kind of struggled with science in high school, and I thought, this isn't going to work. Just kind of wanted to see what I could do to get out and work at the earliest. And then as I got older and started sort of getting around doctors and had family members who were sick, and my kids were born premature, had spent some time in the NICU, started to kind of get that idea again, and thought, I need to at least try. And see what happens. And then, by some miracle, ended up where I am now. That's the short version of the personal statement answer. And there's also the want to do something. I've done for myself. I've done the corporate thing. I want to do something that's more helpful for society. Blah blah blah. The more realistic is. So when I went back, you mentioned that I left the phone company that you and I worked at, and then where you worked for me, and then went back. When I went back, I moved back to Little Rock and worked in the corporate office. And you probably remember how excited I was about anything to do with the corporate office.
Yeah.
And realized that I was going to be there for a while, and really just realized I can't do this. This is not going to work. And then also, you'll be surprised to know, when I was down there, I had the extremely immature, but not exactly incorrect idea that I was the smartest. Can I curse?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I was the smartest motherfucker in the room most times. And
yeah, that's shocking that you.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you'll be shocked to know, but the people that I was in the room with.
Yeah. So it wasn't a lie.
Probably was.
You probably were.
And I thought, okay, I cannot work with these people, and these people who are above me that I'm clearly smarter than I am. I'll show them. I'll get into med school. And so I just took a chemistry class, thinking I was going to fail out of it, because I sucked in chemistry in high school. Somehow got an A, and then got in the next class, and then I got an A in the next class, and then I slowly managed to get to where I am. I will tell you that one of my favorite moments in medical school was I did a rotation my fourth year with Arkansas Children's Hospital on their transport team. So I was riding the helicopter.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so we would go out and get kids and bring them back and do transport runs. And these kids were pretty sick, and we brought back a kid who ended up having to be intubated and sedated, and lines and pumps and everything like that. We got off the elevator from the flight pad, from the helipad, came down. We were working on this kid and moving pretty quick, and one of the Altel, or I guess executives, was there doing a visit because they were still giving money to him, and he recognized me, and I'm sitting there in a flight suit doing compressions on a kid, and he just, in his somebody who did not like me and did not think I was worth much. And I'm sitting here doing this, and I just kind of gave him a little,
That's awesome.
little head
Nice.
nod and a sup. So yeah, so I became a doctor out of spite and narcissism.
I feel like that might be a common doctor story, because I've gotten that feeling from a lot.
Now I will tell you that having been a doctor now, having spent time around other doctors, it is extremely rare for me to consider myself the smartest motherfucker in the room.
I bet.
Wow. So can you give us kind of a high level overview of what the process to become a doctor is like? So we've all heard of interns and attendings, etc.
Yeah.
But
And
all
I
mean?
didn't know that going in. So if you've got anybody that's interested in that, so it starts off with an undergraduate degree, 4-year undergrad, and the thought that you have to major, in quote pre-med, really there's no pre-med degree. A lot of people will major in hard sciences and bio, no requirement to. And as a matter of fact, when people ask me about it, I actually tell them you should probably major in something else, because when you go to start interviewing with people, you're going to be around a couple hundred other people who are chemistry and biology and biochemistry degrees, and you're going to need to have something to differentiate yourself. So, one of my best friends in high school was a philosopher, or in med school was a philosophy major. My undergraduate degree was in economics. Clearly it was a long time before I went to school, and I had to go back and so you do need the certain prerequisites, and it changes for every school. There's a lot of hard science. And so undergraduate degree, and then 4 years of medical school. And then at that point, you have selected your residency, and that there's a little bit of complexity to that as well. You don't just say, okay, I'm going to be a you don't major in neurosurgery, or say, okay, I'm going to be an emergency medicine doctor or family medicine doctor, or cardiologist. What you do is you kind of see, okay, here's what I would like to do. So say I want to go into orthopedic surgery. You go and you interview with the orthopedic residency programs. And then at the end of that process, you list the top 10, 10, 15, it's usually a minimum of 10, but you list all the places where you'd want to go in order of where I want to go there. And then the programs rank who they want in order of their preference. And then there's a computer algorithm that matches everybody together, and it's called the match. So it's not like you're and some specialties are much more competitive than others, like orthopedics and ENT, dermatology, anesthesiology. Emergency medicine is fairly competitive, and so not everybody gets exactly what they want or goes exactly where they want. So it's not like you're going to interview and they say, okay, I want to hire you, and you say, okay, I want to work here. There's a little bit of complexity to it. Not everybody matches. About 98% of people do, but there are some people that fall out of that. So you do that, and then your residency is where you learn your specialty. An intern is a first year in a residency. It used to be you did a separate internship, and then you did a separate residence, and you went through that match again. But the vast majority of people, it's all in one program. It's a minimum of 3 years, usually for the primary care. So like family medicine, some emergency medicine programs, internal medicine, pediatrics. And then as things are more surgery oriented, they're longer. Like general surgery is 5 years, ENT is 5 years, OB-GYN is 4 years. You finish that residency, and then at that point, you're either, you're an attending, which is the full independent doctor in that specialty, or then you can go on and subspecialize and do a fellowship. Like, for example, if you did internal medicine, you finish that residency, and then you can do a fellowship in cardiology or gastroenterology or nephrology. If you do surgery, you can do a fellowship in trauma or critical care or colorectal or something like that. So in theory, you could sit and do fellowships your entire career. Obviously most people don't do that, but for the most part, it's undergraduate, graduate, your undergraduate med school, residency, maybe fellowship.
And then you're an official doctor.
And then you're an official doctor.
That's awesome.
You're an attending.
So you're an attending right now?
So I am an attending. I finished, I actually did my residency in family medicine. It is a little unusual to then turn around and do emergency medicine, but in a lot of rural areas, there's not enough emergency medicine boarded. So that's its own specialty. It's a relatively new specialty. It's really been around since the 80s, late 80s and 90s. So traditionally it was family medicine doctors that did that. In the rural areas and underserved areas, a lot of times they will bring in family medicine doctors who have done some additional training like I did, because a lot of it is just primary care out there, but you still have to be able to do the critical care medicine. So it's a little unusual to have that extra training like I did, but.
So is that why you went into emergency then, so you could work in the rural areas? Was that your passion?
Well, I actually went into family medicine because I wanted to do, I want to do a little everything. And the fortunate part of that is I still can do that. I can do clinic work, I can do hospitalist work, and I was going to do a sports medicine fellowship after that. But then I ended up getting an opportunity to moonlight. Moonlighting, it means you're in residency, but you're out there working independently somewhere on your own license. So kind of like you're an attending, but not really an attending. You're in a rural hospital just for some extra money, and ended up really, really liking it and realizing that I was good at it. And then at that point, so well, maybe let's do this, and then let's do the additional work I need to get relatively competent there.
Now that you've made it through the whole process and you're doing the job of being a doctor, is there anything that you wish you would have known before starting? And if you knew that, would you still do it?
I'm sure I would have done it. That's a question that a lot of people get asked. I don't know. There's anything that I kind of wish I would have known. I don't think anything would have changed it. I'm glad that I spent some time out working in the real world before I went to medical school. I think you do kind of learn how to deal with people and learn how to be an employee and how to work with people, how to work in a team. But maybe I wouldn't have waited that long, because it did kind of dictate my options a little bit. And obviously I don't have as much time to work. So no, I probably things that I, would have liked to have paid more attention to, or maybe given a little bit more of a shot in med school. Like I hated my gynecology rotation in med school, my OB-GYN rotation.
You're vocal about that for sure.
Yeah, I hated it. But I actually I really, really like women's health. And I think if I would have realized that I didn't necessarily have to practice obstetrics, I might have leaned towards that a little bit, or critical.
Yeah. And then what do you like the most about just being a doctor in general? And then what do you like the least?
Well, I do like being the smartest motherfucker in the room most.
And getting paid for it too.
Awesome.
Well, getting paid for it and paying back a substantial amount of loans to get here. I made the joke about, the narcissism being the smartest person in the room, but it is very satisfying to be the person that somebody comes to for answers. That when you and I worked even at the retail store, that's what I liked, when you guys would come to me with a problem with a customer account or something like that. And we would sit down and figure out what's going on and what we can do, and being like the person who gets to say, okay, yes, this is what we're going to do. I like the fact that, especially the type of medicine I practice, there's some instant gratification. Somebody's sick and, somebody's coming and crashing and doing very badly. And for the most part, usually I can fix that. What's funny, speaking of back in the day, I had a realization at one point. So when you guys would come to me with a customer problem, you'd usually say, it would almost like a standard format. Like, I have this person, they spend this much money, been here for so long. This is the problem they had. Here's what I think, here's what I think is going on, and here's what I think fixed. And it's like exactly how a resident or a med student would present a patient to an attending. This person, here's what's going on with them. Here's their past history. here's what's going on now. Here's what I think we ought to do.
How often are they right?
You guys were residents.
I like that. We're residents.
You guys were like residents. Some of you were more residenty than others. Some of you were like little interns.
So I was like the head resident.
And some of you were like, like cheap residents. In med, when you're a med student, as a med student, you want to be right. You want to, there's a little bit of some fear baked into that. And it's very stressful to go to an attending and present a patient. But what I realized, or what was taught to me eventually, what I teach med students those times I get to work with med students or residents, is as a med student, I don't care if you're right or not, because you're not the person making the decision. You've got an intern and a resident and me actually take care of this patient. I just want you to have a plan. I want you to be able to gather information and do some basic level of coming up with what do you think is going on, and just come up with something. If it's completely wrong, we'll work on that. But so long as you do, as a resident, you need to know, you need to be right. And obviously as intending, you need to be more right. But I've had some students that were really, really sharp and come to me and say, here's what I think's going on, and even like we'd question it and I'm not 100% sure, right? And then turns out, yeah, they nailed it. So a good med student certainly makes things easier.
So we got some questions too from just folks that we've been asking you, kind of peppering you with questions here. But someone sent in, what are some of the craziest, in quotes, cases you've ever seen in the ER?
So that is the question that I get asked more often than anything else, that I never, ever really have a good answer for two reasons. One, I see so many patients and I see them for a short amount of time. And unless there was something, for the most part, I forget about it. If you're a patient in my emergency department, I literally the next day, unless, for the most part, I won't remember you if you came up to me, which is one of the reasons I have to write notes that day, because I have no idea. And that's good because, nothing horrible happened, nothing tragic. The ones that I remember are the ones that either I question what I did, which at the time, not that I, think I'm screwing anything up. It's just you're constantly kind of second guessing yourself on everything. That's what we all do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If something went particularly bad or particularly good, or usually those are not the ones that people want to know about. Somebody got a hairspray can stuck up their butt or something.
Exactly. Because that's what we see on TV, right?
Yeah. Because that's what you see at, real doctors of the, in the TV shows. The memorable patients to me are the ones that, somebody came in crashing because of their congestive heart failure, and I had to decide what pressor to use, and I had to be, it was a difficult airway, or I had to get them out real quick. It was in the middle of a whole bunch of people, and that it's not terribly sexy to somebody outside of the business. The other reason is there's a lot of privacy, there's legal privacy issues. Mm-hmm. And so if it's one that's really, really weird, I can't really talk about it because if you really went and dug around, you might be able to identify what was going on.
That makes sense.
That was the hardest for me just when I was coding, because I would see some of those cases that were on the news, and you want to tell people, oh my God, I know that.
See a lot of, one of the things we see a lot of seizures, and seizures in and of themselves are not terribly dangerous. The problem is when somebody doesn't stop seizing, which is what's called status epilepticus, because that can kill you. Yeah. So we get a lot of people who come in with seizures on ambulances because they have one out in public. It takes them a while to kind of get back to baseline, and people freak out and they call EMS, and that's fine. We'll usually just sit on and watch them for a little bit and send them home. But if somebody comes in and they're continuing to seize, then that can get you into trouble, and we're gonna do some stuff about it. So we had somebody that had had a seizure, bystander called EMS, and they continue to exhibit seizure-like behavior in the ambulance. But it seemed like every time it happened, when somebody would come into the picture, like when the ambulance came, they started seizing again. When they came into the emergency department, they seized again. When the nurses came there and they seized again. And they kept doing it, and they looked like seizures. Well, everybody was, the nursing staff, the RT were kind of freaking out a little bit. They were getting ready to assumed I was going to intubate them, and because the treatment for status epilepticus is you give them a lot of depressant drugs, and to try to knock down the seizures. But the problem is eventually you give them so much that they can't breathe on their own. So sometimes we just go ahead and take their airway so we can do that. And also sometimes the anesthesia agents we use for that as well. So so they're getting this person kind of all squared away and getting IVs and things like that. And they started jerking arms and legs again. And I came into the room and this person made eye contact with me. Like, it was very obvious. They looked at I saw my eyes, looked away, started jerking again. So I'm like, that doesn't happen during a seizure.
That's crazy. So they were making.
So I went to the med room and got a little vial of amyl nitrite, which is a little glass vial protected that when you break it open, it smells like cat piss, which is nitrogen. It's extremely noxious. And so I grabbed it, broke it open under this person's nose. They started screaming expletives, looked at me, looked at everybody else in the room, started jerking around again. And we all just kind of walked away, and they stopped. They realized that the jig is up here. So
what was their end game?
Well, so sometimes it's you want those you want those medicines, you want the benzodiazepine medicines to get you high, maybe Ativan or Versed. But sometimes it's just attention seeking or malingering, or I go to the hospital, I don't need to, I get out of going to work, or there are lots of reasons people come to the emergency department. It's not necessarily because they're sick.
I can't imagine, because I try to avoid it. I don't think I've ever actually gone. I've gone with people, but I've never gone. Knock on wood.
Yeah, most reasonable people avoid.
Don't want to go.
Yeah.
So something that we see, in our own medical records or just as coding, the doctor always says like, so-and-so is a pleasant gentleman or woman. So first of all, why does that matter? And then what would I have to do to not be to be an
to be unpleasant? Well, come in and fake status would be one thing.
That would be pretty unpleasant. Yeah.
That's just there's a lot of tradition in medicine. It is very, very, there's lots of, just like, we just always done it that way. And yeah, the old school doctors used to always do that, a pleasant or I really don't put that in my notes. But I know a lot of, like, when I trained, a lot of people still did that. But most people, I just assume they're pleasant. Now I use for kids, I will use like toxic or non-toxic or well appearing, because I'm, anything I put in my note is either for the record or that somebody else can look at it. And if someone wants to second guess me, or if the next person's going to see them. So if I say, somebody is toxic appearing, then they're sick, or they're not toxic or well appearing. But if you wanted to be unpleasant, like, come in and you can scream at me all you want, call me bad names or stuff like that, but don't screw with my nurses or the techs or the janitors or anybody else. That will get you labeled as unpleasant.
I'm glad you brought up the janitors. I feel like they're really the unsung heroes in especially medicine right now. Everywhere right now, it seems.
Yeah, especially now with COVID.
Right.
If you have somebody that is suspected, that we test them or we do any kind of aerosol generating procedures, I can't use that room again until somebody comes in, the housekeeping staff, and does a very, very thorough cleaning, and they're putting themselves at risk doing that. And they're not
not paid.
I know
they're not making anything like I am. So, we're a lot of us do recognize that, and we're trying to do things to take care of them, or make sure they feel. But at the same time, they're part of the team. Yeah. I've had housekeeping staff come to me, been in a room or been in a hall and say, "Hey, this person doesn't look very good," and it's been right, and we had recognized some people getting very sick. So, they're from the people drawing blood to the housekeeping staff to the triage nurse, to the insurance people. Everybody is part of that team.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
And I don't accept any patients mistreating them.
That's good.
It's like, again, it was like when we worked at the phone company. A customer could come in and scream at me all they wanted, and well, they did a lot. But where I drew the line was them trying to abuse you guys.
Well, you always had our back. And then every weekend, every Saturday, he would buy us pizza.
You've mentioned that to me before.
Out of your own pocket. And that shit's expensive.
Yeah.
Emos. I mean, it was a huge stack of those pizzas. And we never appreciated it as much as we did once we left and realized you paid for it. It wasn't corporate money. But that's why, that's why I say you were one of the best bosses, because you really took care of us. So, and I assume you do the same to your staff here.
I try to, yeah.
We've had a few questions about just the workflow of the ER. So what's the reason that so many ERs will have long wait times? And then here in Florida, and I don't think I've seen this in Arkansas, but in Florida, there's billboards in some places that say 3-minute wait at such and such ER.
Yeah.
So why is it so different and different?
So, the reason that there's so much advertising, things like it, is emergency rooms make a lot of money for the hospital. And so trying to drive traffic to your particular ER, if you can, people are going to want to do that. The flow, the reason that there's lots of, there's long waits. One, usually we can only handle so many patients at a time. And there's no, even though we try to staff, based on when busy times are, you never know what's going to happen. And it's not, I think most reasonable people realize that it's not first come, first serve. As I tell people all the time that complain about their wait is if you're waiting, you're not dying. I'm going to take the best. If you were in there for an hour and a half, and I understand that it's frustrating to see 4 other people go in, but if you're there because you've had a rash for a month, and you're now getting it looked at, if someone comes in with chest pain or laceration or respiratory failure, they're going to bump your place in line. But there's just so many moving parts and so few fixed resources like rooms and nurses, and the triage people can only get to so many people. Then that's why there's going to be wait times sometimes.
Okay, that makes sense.
So then on that topic, what as an ER provider, then would you want to tell people when you should not come to the ER, and then what should people come to the ER for? Well,
so I used to get angry and I would never say, or very rarely, I would sometimes would say, you shouldn't be here. Now, sometimes occasionally I might kind of passively aggressively say something like, when it's really like my throat's been sore for 2 months, or I've had this rash, or, I've had back pain for 2 years, or I have a hangnail, or I'm hungover.
Wow.
Sometimes I will say something to the effect of, so I'm Dr. Starnes, what's your emergency today? Or, what, but a lot of times it'll get a little frustrating to the patients if somebody comes in with stomach pain and it's chronic. If you're in my emergency department, the way I'm trained is if you're in a bed in front of me, I assume you're dying actively right now in front of me. And my job is to figure out whether that's true or not. So somebody comes in with stomach pain, and they said, and I ask, how long have you had this? And they say, well, I've always had it, or I've had it for 2 years. Then I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions, or ask several times, to make sure there is nothing at all different today, that has it always been here? Has it always felt like this? Is there anything changed? Sometimes people get annoyed about that, and I'll just explain, look, I need to figure out, I need to be looking for big, bad, scary stuff today, or do I need to just help you feel better and get you to the right person? But going back to the original question, I used to get upset with people who would come in for seemingly non-emergent. But the problem is, we see everybody. We are required legally, by law, to see every single person that comes in the emergency department, regardless of insurance, ability to pay, citizen, non-citizen, anything like that. Not everybody has access to primary. So you see a lot of people come in, why didn't you come to your primary care doctor? Well, either they don't have one, seems to be in a lot of people, they can't afford it, they don't have any insurance, so they can't get in a primary care doctor because they won't see, don't have to see you if you can't pay them.
Right.
Or it's 2:00 in the morning and you just got off of work and your tooth hurts, or your kid's been sick, has a fever, and yes, normally this would be a primary care deal, but they're all open in traditional hours. Yes, there are things that don't necessarily are not an emergency, but we are the carrier of last resort, to use an old telephone term, that will take everybody. So, go ahead and come in. And I try very hard not to make people feel bad, because some people will come in and chest is hurting. We'll rule out everything big, bad, and scary. And I'll tell them, hey, it's probably just strained a muscle, and they'll feel bad about it. And I tell them, look, I would rather you come in and me tell you it's nothing. I'd rather that happen 100 times than one person say it's probably nothing at home and go ahead and stay home and die of a heart attack. So, there are generally not a whole lot of reasons not to come to the emergency department. There's because you don't know what's going on and you may not have the ability to see anybody else, but there's lots of things that are non-emergent, which makes a lot of insurance companies try to not pay for emergency room visits if this is something non-emergent. And my response is, how do you know? How does this person know?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you come with a headache, there's a lot of things that a headache can be really, really bad, or it can be just debilitating, and you need me to help that go away. But if then the insurance company said, well, that was non-emergent because it wasn't anything bad. Well, you don't know it's not a subarachnoid hemorrhage or a aneurysm or something like that.
So this is kind of a funny question, but how similar is real life medicine to what's portrayed on like Grey's Anatomy on TV? And
I never. Oh, go ahead.
There's a lot of hookups, for example, in the on-call room on Grey's Anatomy, and I assume that probably doesn't happen in real life, but
it's got to happen.
Well, I will say that I never hooked up with anybody in a call room. I'm sure it happens, but usually you're too busy, or if you're on call and nothing's going on, you just want to sleep, or you're writing notes, or you're watching Netflix on your iPad. I really didn't watch much of Grey's Anatomy. I saw exactly one scene, and I actually Grey's Anatomy is one that people always ask about.
What about ER back in the day?
I saw ER's a little bit more real. What's really realistic is Scrubs. Most medical
forgot
will tell you that
that's
Scrubs is very, very, and actually there's a podcast now where Zach Braff and Donald, I forget his last name, the Turk and JD are actually going back and rewatching, and they're bringing on Bill Lawrence, who is the showrunner, and John C. Reilly and the people like that, and they're talking about it. And they had a conversation very early with Bill Lawrence, and his best friend is the real JD, who's a doctor, who's now a critical care doctor in California, and JD, the real JD, basically, you can use all these stories, you can do, you can make it about me being a screw up, and I'll help you with everything, but you got to do it right, and not only just like the medicine, but the thought process and the stress and the character building is extremely close. And they say that they get that all the time, and it's absolutely the case. But the Grey's Anatomy scene that I saw was apparently all the surgical interns were up at dawn, like going for a jog or run or something like that. Yeah. And my immediate thought was, oh, hell no. No, they should be, it's 6 o'clock. So they would have been there already for an hour and a half, rounding on their patients. They should be writing notes, should be consenting, getting the pre-ops going. They should be getting ready to scrub in.
Yeah, there's not just a lot of drama. They're
terrorizing the med students. No. So and the things I hear about that, like people, cowboy thing. Okay, here's a couple residents who are going to do neurosurgery on somebody because the insurance company denied them. The people would have been thrown out years and years ago. So
cool.
So speaking of rules, then, is there a rule that you wish wasn't in place that you could break? And if so, what rule would that be?
There's one. So we did talk about. There's a law called EMTALA, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it is. It's the law that I mentioned mentioned earlier that says that we do have to see everybody. The problem is I do believe that everybody should be, seen. If you're sick, everybody should be seen. The problem is when you're seen, you have to be seen with a capital S, like a full workup, full exam, a full review, review systems and history and things like that. And sometimes, particularly now with the COVID outbreak, there was a lot of discussion about this. We need an ability to be able to do some quick triage of some people and say, look, you're not sick, you don't need to be here. Here's primary care that you can follow up with. Not seeing people because they don't have insurance, but seeing people because I can very quickly ascertain that you're not sick, especially middle of pandemic when we've got everyone's overloaded, that I take your pulse ox, take your temperature, you can follow up with primary care. So I think EMTALA doesn't need to be necessarily repealed, but I think some changes need to come out of that.
So we got quite a few COVID related questions. And so we tried to combine quite a few of those, but specifically in Arkansas and in Florida, cases have really spiked recently. And, I think it's in over 21 states right now, they're spiking. And some of the different leaders are saying that's only because we have additional testing.
No, that's not true.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you agree with that, or do you attribute, the cases are actually spiking?
Well, they are actually spiking, and the way that we know this is because hospitalizations are going up and ICU admissions are going up. So, and the rate of positive tests is going up, and because you're seeing clusters in particular areas, rather than we have lots of positive tests in the places where there's lots of people who are being tested. We have lots of positive tests in very rural communities where there is not an absolute number of patients being tested.
Yeah, and so then we had some people in different counties, and they said, "Oh, well, it's just in Northwest Arkansas. Should we really be worried in our county?" So how do you judge that, if the spread will go throughout the state or if they're able to contain that spread?
Well, people travel from Washington County to other counties. It's not like people don't travel. So that the idea that it's going to stay one particular place is not. I don't see that actually happening.
So as far as on the mask wearing, at the very beginning they said, don't wear a mask in public because they needed masks for our PPE for you guys on the front lines, which I totally understand, right? But I think now we're at a point where people have masks, they can get masks. It's not taking it away from anyone. But I think, there's so much angst about wearing a mask in public, and some people really against it, and then some people really for it. Where do you?
People who do not wear masks are selfish. That's where I go down. No, you don't need an N95. You don't need a respirator. But if you're not wearing a mask, you're not wearing a mask. People, well, I'm not afraid of getting it, so I'm not wearing it. Well, it ain't about you. It's for the other people that you're not doing it, and it does bother me how little utilization there is. There is no reason not to wear one. You're not going to trap. There was the idea earlier that you were going to retain carbon dioxide, or I will personally check your blood gas after your half-hour visit to Kroger. I've worn masks for 11 hours at a time. I wear a mask all day.
Yeah.
And I'm not going into hypercarbic encephalopathy. So you popping down to the cut rate for 20 minutes, you're gonna be fine.
You're gonna be fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But it's what it unfortunately for a lot of people has become. It's just another thing that gets to be politicized. Mm-hmm. This is how I identify my tribe, is we don't mask because our leaders say it's, if Donald Trump says he's not going to wear a mask, by God, I'm not going to wear a mask.
Right.
It just another reason that leadership is utterly failed in all this. So there's no reason not to wear a mask. Absolutely zero. You need to wear a mask because you don't know who you're going to be around.
And then we also got a lot of questions about herd immunity. So is herd immunity possible with something like COVID-19?
So I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know the exact, but I think I had seen something today that, you would have to get about a 70% to do that, which still means that there's going to be 100 million people who are going to get it. And if your fatality rate is, even 1%, then that's 1 million people who are going to die of this.
Yeah.
And we don't know that you can't get it a second time, and you don't know who you're going to spread to. So, that while we are looking and trying to come up with both a vaccine and both some therapies that may potentially help treatment, that's we can't hang our hat on herd immunity.
And you mentioned the vaccine, but there are some people that are scared that the vaccine will not be effective, and there's several rumors. But I personally believe in vaccines. Do you feel like we could have an effective vaccine?
Well, I hope we do.
Yeah.
The problem is it takes a really, really long time to come up with a vaccine, and there's no guarantee that there's absolutely necessarily going to be one. I mean, we don't have a vaccine. The common cold is caused by a coronavirus.
Oh yeah.
And we don't have a vaccine for coronavirus. We don't have a vaccine for MERS. We don't have a vaccine for SARS. We don't have a vaccine for we don't have a vaccine for hepatitis C. So there's lots of viruses that we have put a lot of work into that hadn't happened yet. So I'm hoping that it does, but also most people who know anything about virology are kind of estimating that this is potentially a year and a half away situation.
So if we were to experience a drastic increase in COVID patients over the next month, even just specifically there in Arkansas, do you feel that your hospitals that you work on are equipped to handle that, or have?
So I typically work in very, very rural community access hospitals that do not have ICUs, do not have critical care doctors, or the nurses are very experienced, and and I certainly know what I'm doing on there. I'm not keeping these people. If somebody is super sick, they're getting shipped off somewhere. What concerns me is the places where I typically will send these people. Are they going to start running out of places? I guess the one good thing is that when this all started in March, people really got their acts together to get prepared for this, both in staffing and in their hospitals that made whole COVID floors, basically built small hospital wings for these folks, and most of those places are going to be okay, and getting as much protective gear as it can. Mm-hmm. Arkansas, even with the highest projections that they're looking at, should probably be okay. Missouri is okay. Arizona looks like it's going to be absolutely hosed. They're already looking at potentially, running out of ICU beds and units and things like that. But what I worry about is, am I going to start running out of ventilators or the medicines I need to have people on ventilators? And we're going to be able to spread this out enough to where I'm treating a whole bunch of people over the space of weeks that can be handled, rather than the space of a few days.
Have you noticed since we've all been into hand washing more, and have you noticed a trend in other communicable diseases decline? Maybe they've declined because of that. And
there's no evidence to back that up, but people have talked about that, is the fact that more people are wearing masks and more people are staying away from each other, and social distancing is did the flu season end? It was a bad flu. The flu season kind of did end a little early. I'm not seeing as much strep and community acquired pneumonia and bronchitis and things like that. So I do think that people concentrating on hygiene and staying away from each other, the social distancing, things like that, probably has resulted in a reduction of some of the other airborne diseases as well. That's a really good question. That's something that it's not my pager. That's the smoke alarm.
Oh, it's a real emergency.
It is a real emergency.
That's funny. So what are you cooking?
I'm cooking my once a year steak.
Once a year?
About once a year I have a steak, and for some reason today I decided I wanted one.
Okay, so we're getting to the end here, but you don't really have any casual hobbies. Like you started running one day and then the next day you're running a 50-mile race, right? And then you're like, "Oh, I think I'll buy a bike." And then you're in full racing gear on this racing team and running, I don't know, 200 miles or so. So what have you always been so extreme, and then what's your next extreme hobby plan?
I have always kind of had a tendency to, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to the ridiculous extreme, especially if I'm kind of good at it. I'm actually kind of on a little bit of a break on the bike. Even before all this happened, I kind of let myself get burned out a little bit. But I just actually just bought a mountain bike. So of course now I'm, planning on these big, long, epic races on it and doing absolutely dumb shit on it that I shouldn't with my level of expertise. It's they're like with everything else, there's no racing going on. Everything got canceled this year. I'm signed up for a race in November that I'm almost certain will not happen, which is kind of like a prerequisite race for a big race next year. So it's hard for me. It's hard for me to train without knowing, am I going to get to do anything else with it? So, but my shoulders are awful, so I can't swim. So I guess that's out. So I have to I have to decide whether I'm gonna start running or riding again.
If you could tell the masses one piece of medical knowledge, if you could share with them one piece of medical knowledge, what would it be?
My favorite medical term in the world that I actually get like legitimately giddy when I get to say it to a patient is something called Mittelschmerz.
What is that?
So it's Mittelschmerz. It is a German term that means middle pain, and it is the pain that a woman gets halfway through her menstrual cycle when the follicle of the egg ruptures from the ovary.
Oh.
And so I get a lot of it. Very often I get young women, particularly who are, teenagers, 20 years old, who come in with, it can really hurt with pain in their in their lower side, and it's right about halfway through their period, and I'll rule out everything else. And then I'll say, well, it's probably this. And I'll literally just sort of I'll grin and start bouncing and get all giddy, and I get to say my favorite medical term.
I'm sure they
explain it, and then they look at me like I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate that.
Wash your hands, get vaccinated.
You're always talking about the thing where you have to designate a person or what?
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. If everyone will do one thing, is one of the most difficult things that we have to do is end of life, or just you come in and you can't really make decisions for yourself. It is not only is it stressful for your family or medical team doesn't know what to do with you. When you come in unconscious, seriously ill, that's the worst time in the world to decide whether you want CPR or you want to be on a vent or you want life-saving measures, because it's no one's had time to process it. It's stressful enough. Family members are probably not there. We don't know who's speaking for whom. So coming up with a written plan and communicating to those people who is your decision maker, what do you want done now? And I don't mean 6-year-olds or people with long-term issues. I've seen 25-year-olds come in critical illnesses where we had to make life and death decisions. You never know if you're going to get in a car accident, or 25-year-olds have strokes too. Everyone needs to have somebody, if it's a family member or loved one or my person is another doctor, because it's hard for family members to make that make the decision that we're going to move you to comfort care. That end of life issues in palliative medicine we'd have a whole other long conversation about that. But yeah, everyone needs to have have conversation with family members about what do you want done in specific situations.
Good advice. Thank you. Okay, we're near the end. We just want to do a couple rapid fire just for fun to end it out. So,
Okay.
and I feel like you might have a lot. So try to pick one. What is your biggest pet peeve?
People who won't learn, and people who judge patients who have socioeconomic issues that may not be out of their control. So somebody comes in with a drug overdose, or somebody comes in and they're drug seeking, or they're on high. Well, I don't care. They still, they're just crazy. So they still deserve respect, deserve treatment, deserve care, and maybe we can figure out why they're in this situation and try to help them. So I have a tendency to, especially when I work at places that have more than one doctor at a time, I'll pick up those patients more often than not, because maybe I can actually spend some time with them and figure out, hey, what is it? Why aren't you taking your insulin? Do you have a plate? Are you homeless? So you can't put it in the refrigerator? Why are you taking narcotics? Do you have chronic pain? Do we have a primary care doc? Can we come up with a plan for that? Are you overdosing because is there somebody who can have Narcan available to you? So, my pet peeve is people who prejudge some of the people who have some issues like that a lot of times are not necessarily somebody's fault.
So Jen said that your life motto seems to be always go to the show. So what was your first concert, and what's your most memorable or favorite concert?
The first concert I went to where I paid my or big person paid my own money. Believe it or not, it was Eric Clapton at the Royal Albert Hall in London in February of 1995. Yeah, it only got worse from there.
Yeah,
nice. That's awesome.
I was living in London at the time, and a friend of mine, I liked him, and it was the tour after he put on did the blues album.
That's so cool.
So he's had kind of made a resurgence. I lucked into some seats. So actually, I got a wave from the Duchess of Kent from Sarah Ferguson.
That's awesome.
That's crazy.
Yeah, George Harrison was there in the box with her. It was really cool.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome.
It's really, really hard for me to say what my favorite concert has been. Probably the best show I went to was seeing Tom Waits at a very cool little small venue in St. Louis, because Tom Waits never tours.
Yeah.
And I was able to see him. The last Isabel show I saw at Red Rocks last year.
Oh, I bet that was awesome.
was I mean, it was I've seen him 12 times over the last 2 years.
Gosh.
Yeah, so I have a lot of friends who fans of him, and that's kind of like how we all get together as we go see shows.
Nice.
That's cool.
My friend Becky lives like right outside of Red Rocks. We travel together and see those shows. So her and I saw him there. But over the last year or so, his shows have been getting more and more like serious rock shows rather than the acoustic, more mellow stuff. But it's always great seeing him and Amanda play together.
Yeah.
And David Crosby opened.
Amanda.
I've almost gotten to the point now where I go to the shows more to see Amanda Shires than I do.
I love her.
She is so
and
good.
I love the High Women too with Brandy.
Yes,
Carlisle.
and I actually got publicly called out by her on the internet for
No!
not going. So my friend Becky went and saw her in Denver before all this started. It was like in February, and I wasn't able to get out and go. And so she got to meet Amanda.
Oh my God.
They recorded like a little video message, and Amanda mildly chastised me for not going.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, I'm thoroughly impressed with that.
Yeah, that is so
But the best part of that show was David Crosby opened for him.
Oh, wow.
And he came back out, and David sang on a couple of that. He's gotten to be good friends with Jason, and he sang on a couple of tracks on the new album. But at the encore, Crosby came out and they did Ohio, which of course was about the Kent State shootings in 1970. And it was clear that 40 years later, David Crosby is still absolutely heartbroken over that.
Yeah.
He is not over the Kent State massacre. When he just pleads, just screams 4 dead in Ohio. It comes from the heart for him. But just being able to see a legend like that with somebody who's more relatively new. It was just a lot of great energy to that show.
Yeah.
That is
that's
just
awesome.
so cool. Favorite beverage?
Non-alcoholic, Q ginger beer.
Oh, okay. I like their
It's this
tonic.
little, yeah. That's my favorite, like post run, post ride. And my favorite alcoholic is usually like bourbon and ginger beer, ginger ale, or a Tank 7 from Boulevard Brewing Company out of Kansas City.
Favorite snack?
Whatever's in front of me. Gotten where I just like graze on almonds all day, and I guess that's relatively healthy because
Yeah.
Yeah, I
most of
knew
it you
that
don't
happened.
absorb anyway. So right now, I'm going through cans of wasabi and smoked salt almonds.
Okay, what's one thing you cannot do?
Can't play a bar. So I recently started trying to play the guitar, and I have a really, really hard time playing what are called bar chords, which is where you put your first finger down all the way across the frets and then, you make the chord below that. I just do that to save my life. Yeah, that's another like extreme hobby. Like, a normal person would just buy a guitar and learn how to play it. But no, I went from a guitar that I got used at a pawn shop in Nashville to then I need this kind of guitar, and I need an acoustic, but I want this specific acoustic. Like I went and bought a Martin D18 because that was what Jimmy Rogers played.
Oh my God.
I just fixated on because Woody Guthrie played a Martin and Jimmy Rogers and Hank Williams. So they're absolutely beautiful guitars.
So do you plan on retiring? And if so, where are you going to retire to, and what are you going to do?
I probably will never actually get to retire. Again, when you develop several $100,000 in school debt late in life, I want to buy some land and have a canine hospice.
Oh,
nice.
So apparently that's an actual thing. I didn't realize it. I adopted a senior husky a couple of years ago. She was like already 12 years old. And then she came down with probable lymphoma. And so she actually went pretty quick, but I was kind of researching what to do and came across that. So, either that or, something like, we're just going to go through and we're just going to adopt everybody, all these super, super senior dogs so they can have some place to be at the very end. When I adopted my most recent dog, my pit Sassy, she had been in the shelter that she was in for 6 years. When I left, they were mentioning there was a dog that had been there for 11 years.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do you want people?
I enjoyed it.
Do you want people to find you on social media, and if so, where?
Oh, sure, that's fine. I'm RotoTutor, ROTO_TUDOR on internet, and it's a public account. I will just say that if you're asking a random doctor on the internet to give you medical advice, then you're in trouble.
Yourself.
So don't expect that. But I interact with people, and people want to find me. That's perfectly fine.
Cool.
Nice. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
You're welcome, guys. I enjoyed it. Anytime.